Jen, I missed one name. So it's Liz, Sheila, Cheryl, you, and who's the fifth person?
Julie.
Thank you. Yes, yes.
Okay, Liz, just let me know when everybody is in the virtual door. Welcome, everybody.
Will do, Jen.
It feels a little bit like opening the big doors at the conference center and everybody streaming in while we're waiting for everybody to get in virtually.
All right, Jen, it's slowed down a little bit. I mean, I think while you do your welcome, probably people will still be joining, but you could probably start now.
Excellent. Wonderful. Thanks, Liz. I appreciate that. Welcome, everybody, to the 47th Annual Environmental Congress, our very first virtual Congress. It's wonderful to have all of you here today. Of course, we wish we could gather in person, but I'm happy that you're here with us and we can do this safely. We will be tweeting today from @AnJackTweets, that's our handle, at #EnviroCongress. And I am having my first virtual environmental Congress IT problem. So bear with me here. My screen does not seem to be advancing. There we go. Oh, now it's going to get out of control. My computer's having a lazy, rainy day. Can't imagine why. So welcome to our 47th Annual Environmental Congress, our first virtual with all of the wonderful virtual hiccups that come along with it. We'll be tweeting from @AnJackTweets today, and so go ahead and join us there, and #EnviroCongress in any of your posts about the facts that you're hearing today or any questions that you have. We'd love to have you join that virtual conversation with us. A little bit of housekeeping. If you have joined us already, you've heard this before, so please bear with us. If you have any questions, go ahead and scroll over the bottom of your screen. You should have a pop-up menu that comes up and you'll see a Q&A option. Go ahead and type your questions there for our speaker today, but also you can type some of your IT questions and we can try to troubleshoot those for you. If you can't hear us or you're having trouble with the different view options, go ahead and type your question there. If you're still having technical problems, you can go ahead and call AnJack's Deputy Director, Elizabeth Ritter. That's her cell phone there, but let's keep that number private just for IT needs associated with the AnJack Environmental Congress. And also I want everybody to know that all sessions are being recorded and we will post those sessions at AnJack's YouTube channel. We will be sending a link to all of our Environmental Congress presentations to all registered attendees at a later date. So you can go ahead and share that with your other Environmental Commission members, your friends, your family, or go back and rewatch a session if you missed something or just want to see it again. I do want to say anybody who missed last night's social hour really should go back and take a look at that when we send it out. It was a lot of fun last night. And some really powerful artists were able to join us and bring a smile to our face. So I would encourage everybody to go ahead and take a look at that one. I want to thank all of our stalwart sponsors who have made Environmental Congress possible. These sponsors are very important to AnJack and they're important to us bringing this programming to you. We're also proud to have them as sponsors because we see them as strong environmental actors working for clean water, clean energy, and good assessments for development and more often redevelopment as we see it in New Jersey. I also want to thank our nonprofit partners. That list keeps growing, and of course, our foundation sponsors. We would not be able to bring Environmental Congress, any of our virtual programming, and our once was and will be again someday in-person programming to you without the support of all of our wonderful sponsors. And so I also want to thank ANJAC staff and board. These are our staff members, and this is how we're coming to you today with our fuzzies, our kitties, our puppies, from our living rooms, our dining rooms, our kitchens, doing our very best to answer your questions, encourage your actions throughout the pandemic, to work virtually, to keep your community and your local officials focused on the big issues that are facing New Jersey, from flooding and drought to climate change to clean energy, and of course, the one big word of today, and what our keynote speaker is going to talk to us about, but I'm going to steal just a little bit of the thunder beforehand: plastics. And so we have all talked about plastics again and again and again at Environmental Congress, in virtual sessions, in in-person sessions, at late night meetings with your council, in the paper, at the State House, more times than I can count. And it is because of you, and it is because of your action as environmental commissioners. It is because you have passed 130 municipal ordinances to ban single-use plastics that we are at the pivot point we are at right now. So with those ordinances alone, because of your action, you are saving 400 million single-use plastic bags annually from use in New Jersey. That is because of each and every one of you environmental commissioners who are here with us today, and many of you who cannot be with us today. And it is also because of you that New Jersey has now passed the strongest plastic pollution reduction act in the nation. We are extraordinarily proud of this act. It will ban paper bags, plastic bags, with some minor exceptions that we're happy to talk about in the Q&A or after our keynote session. Polystyrene, so there's styrofoam food containers, and we'll make plastic straws available upon request only when we can all get back together in restaurants and bars safely. But the job is not done yet. Governor Murphy has approximately 3 weeks from yesterday, not that I'm counting, but approximately 3 weeks from yesterday to sign the bill into law. So please, please call him, tweet at him. If you can find an email address, we've got some, sometimes they go through, sometimes not as well. 609-292-6000 is the best number to go to. We know that some of you say the phone lines are full sometimes. That's a good sign. That means he's getting a lot of pressure. We know that industry is lobbying the governor's office hard. They are not happy that the most densely populated state in the nation, with 9 million residents, have decided to stand up and say no more plastic pollution. So they're fighting, and we need to make sure the governor knows that we want this. We know that you want this bill. 130 local ordinances tell us that. So with that, I want to encourage you to also continue your community action and activism by voting. The voter registration deadline in New Jersey has passed. The voter registration deadline in Pennsylvania is October 19th. And I'm sad to say, I can't remember when the New York deadline is, but you can find an awful lot of information at League of Women Voters website. We're proud to partner with them this year. And so you will see these kind of graphics on their social media sites as well as ours. We'll be sending out more information over email. If you have any questions about how to vote in New Jersey, you can go to nj.gov/state/elections or Google how to vote in New Jersey. Every registered voter should have already received or will be receiving their ballot in the mail. We're encouraging people to vote by mail or to use those county ballot boxes. If you'd like to use a county ballot box, make sure you use a county ballot box in the county in which you are voting. So I vote in Mercer County, so I use the county ballot box down the street from me. You can't drive halfway across the state and use a county ballot box in another area of the state. So again, if you have any questions, that's nj.gov/state/elections. I also want to humbly ask you to consider making a small donation to ANJAC at anjac.org/donate. Your small dollar donations, particularly the small dollar monthly donations, the $10, $15, $20 a month donations, mean an awful lot to us. They help us sustain our programming, sustain our support to meet with you and brainstorm and set strategic plans about the goals you want to accomplish in your communities. They help us to do work in Trenton, which we seem to be having some success doing virtually these days. And all of our donations help to continue to support you, your municipality, and your local environment. So I just want to thank you. I know that times are tough, and I know that there are an awful lot of good and worthy causes these days. So anything that you are able to contribute, we really do appreciate, and we work to be good stewards of your dollars. With that said, we're very excited to have Judith Enck today with us. She is former EPA Region 2 Administrator and founder of Beyond Plastics. I'll turn over the mic to her in just one moment. Judith is a mentor of mine and is really responsible for inciting my passion about plastics. And she called me up probably about 6 years ago now and said, "Hey, Jen," because we knew each other just a little bit. And she said, "Are you tired of picking up other people's trash?" And I said, "What are you talking about, Judith?" And she said, "What if we went to the source?" And so Judith, as I have gotten, and I know many of you have gotten, sometimes get tired of doing these spring, summer, and fall stream cleanups, beach cleanups, park cleanups, and going back to the same place time and time again, and picking up what feels like the same trash for years and decades. So she had this brilliant idea to attack the problem at the source. And here we are today with 130 ordinances and a strong bill and lots of states who've taken action. And we're going to hear more information about what's next and what's beyond plastic shortly. Before I turn it over to Judith, I want to invite you to come back next week and join us at 6 p.m. on Thursday. These Environmental Congress sessions, rather than a one-day forum, we're coming to you all month long on Thursday evenings and Friday at noon. So please come join us next week, next Thursday, for a New Jersey legislative update. And then 1 week from today at noon, where we can talk about clean energy projects in New Jersey. And then the following week, we're very excited to have NJDEP Deputy Commissioner Olivia Glenn with us to talk about what is the strongest environmental justice bill in the nation. So New Jersey is really leading on a number of environmental fronts, and we're very proud to be talking about making responsible decisions to alleviate some of the burdens that our overburdened communities, mostly Black, brown, and low-income communities, have suffered for years and years and years. So New Jersey is going to start making some really good, smart, humane decisions, and Olivia is going to tell us about how we're going to go about that. I also want to invite you, my last slide, to join us for a fundraiser, virtual, at home. So you can bring your beverage of choice in your pajama pants on November 13th. This is right before Thanksgiving. And so you can come hear about some New Jersey distilleries, wineries, and breweries. And so you can learn about what you might want to stock up on for the holidays, and also learn about their environmental practices. There's some amazing techniques for carbon sequestration, stormwater management, water conservation, and community activism and action that these businesses are embracing. So we invite you to join us for that as well. And with that, I just want to thank everybody for being here with us on this rainy fall day and tuning in to learn more about Beyond Plastics, what's next, and to hear from my mentor, Judith Enck. So thank you, Judith, for being here with us today.
Great, thanks, Jen. I'm really honored to be here with NJAC and so impressed that this is your 47th annual Congress. It is hard to keep things going, and I'm glad you've accomplished so much. So this is me. I'm a visiting professor at Bennington College in Southern Vermont. I also founded an organization called Beyond Plastics. I live in upstate New York, just a few miles from the Vermont border. And I got to know Jen and the team at NJAC, which is so impressive. It's certainly Jen at the steering wheel, but also Liz, Sheila, Cheryl, and Julie. It seems to be an all-girl band that is really getting stuff done, which is often what women do. So I got to know Anjak when I served as EPA Regional Administrator. Next slide, please. It was during the Obama administration. I don't know about you, but I miss no drama Obama. And I was honored to serve as Regional Administrator for Region 2, which included New Jersey, New York, 8 Indian nations in New York, Puerto Rico, and the US Virgin Islands. So it was kind of like 2 different regions, the Caribbean and then New York and New Jersey. And my work at EPA was very much guided by my good friend, Lisa Plevin, who served as our Chief of Staff at EPA Region 2. New Jersey is fortunate to have Lisa heading up the Highlands Commission. And my job at EPA was really just to do whatever Lisa told me to do. And whenever I did that, I stayed out of trouble. The interesting thing about being a political appointee at a federal agency is you know when your last day at work is. The administration urges you to stay right to the last day. They want you to turn out the lights. So I stayed to the end, which was great. What else was I going to do? And then I had to figure out what to do next. And I had time to figure that out. I did have just a few lucrative offers from the private sector, which I politely declined because, like, who needs to make money? That's overrated. I wanted to have an impact on an issue. And of course, I first thought about working on climate change. But after doing some research and talking to experts, I decided I wanted to really focus on preventing plastic pollution. And the reason, and what I'll talk about today, is because plastic pollution, in fact, is a climate change issue. It's an ocean issue. It's an environmental justice issue. It's an equity issue. It also deals with overconsumption. Next slide. So we find ourselves in a politically difficult time, particularly at the federal level. And I think it's good to remember that this nation faced really tough times in the past and made it through. I'm thinking about the heroic work of Dr. Martin Luther King and John Lewis tackling institutional racism. Next slide, please. This past April would have been the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. And so of course we couldn't gather in the public square like this, millions of people observing Earth Day all over the world. And what Earth Day brought us was a number of new federal environmental laws, like the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act. A number of the bedrock environmental laws were signed by Richard Nixon. Next slide, please. And what we're seeing today is new, amazing, prophetic almost leaders on a number of issues. So if you're new to the climate change issue, read anything written by Bill McKibben. He's at Middlebury College in northern Vermont. I'm at Bennington in southern Vermont. Next slide, please. And pay attention to what young people are saying at climate change. I'm very impressed with the work being done by the Sunrise Movement, 350.org. And I think to accomplish things, we need the input, the ideas, the energy of young people married with some of the wisdom and experience of us older folks. I don't think we should be in 2 different camps. We really should be working together because the issue is so very urgent. Next slide. And the wisdom of young people. This is Greta Thunberg of Sweden, who won the Nobel and who is really challenging us to do so much more on these issues. Next slide. So the reason I decided to focus on plastic pollution is largely because of this. Almost 9 million tons of plastic entering the ocean every year. So I decided I wanted to teach a class on plastic pollution, which I'm doing at Bennington College. We are now teaching that class online. We have 85 students enrolled this semester. You can take my class online next semester. just shoot me an email at judithenck.bennington.edu. We'll put you on the waiting list. And I decided I wanted to teach because I want to help train the next generation of environmental leaders and inform people and learn from students. But also, anyone who's taught in high school or college, you know that it forces you to stay current on issues. I mean, I've testified in Congress, I've presented at the United Nations. The only time I'm really worried is when I'm teaching a class to college students and I'm nervous that they're going to ask me a question that I don't know the answer to. So forcing myself to teach a class forces me to stay current on the issues. So I teach this class on plastic pollution, and I head this new organization called Beyond Plastics, which is essentially a nonprofit embedded at an academic institution. And what we want to do is change this number, which, by the way, is a gross underestimate. Next slide, please. And this was the issue that kind of stopped me in my tracks. Scientists tell us that unless we change things dramatically, like getting Governor Murphy to sign the plastic trifecta bill in New Jersey, other important legislative changes, unless we change things, by 2025, for every 3 pounds of fish in the ocean, there will be 1 pound of plastic. Next slide. And there are enormous implications. This is a seabird. This is not an outlier. This is a very common occurrence with seabirds. They're eating a lot of plastic. You see a little bit of red and orange there. They think it's shrimp, and so they eat it. If there's algae built up on the plastic in the ocean, it has an attractive smell to them. And then when they eat the plastic, they feel full, so they stop eating. So they don't have enough calories to survive. Next slide, please. And so this is certainly an important climate change issue and an ocean issue. You all know that plastics are made from chemicals and fossil fuels. They used to be made by chemicals and oil, but now 99% are made by chemicals and ethane, which comes from ethylene, which is a byproduct of hydrofracking. Next slide. So I just want to spend a little bit of time on the fracking and plastic connection. And the major thing I want to tell you is you cannot solve the climate change issue without solving the plastic pollution issue. So this is not at scale. Thankfully, there's no fracking in New Jersey or New York, but there is in Pennsylvania. And when you frack for gas, look at the orange flare. That's ethane gas that's vented into the atmosphere. This is a potent greenhouse gas. And typically that will be vented into the atmosphere. But what we're seeing now is companies are building pipelines to capture that ethane gas. Next slide. And they send the ethane gas to facilities called ethane cracker facilities. And what these ethane cracker facilities do is they heat the gas to high temperature, essentially cracking the molecules. And that becomes ethylene, which is the main building block for single-use plastic. So it's kind of a funny name, an ethylene cracker plant. But these are being built in areas where there are hydrofracking facilities. These are multi-billion-dollar plants. The first big new one is under construction in Monaca, Pennsylvania. It's being built by Shell. President Trump has visited there twice in the past year. And this is all designed to make sure that there are new feedstocks to make cheap plastic even cheaper than it is today. So this plant exists to make polystyrene and plastic bags and plastic straws. And there are dozens of new ethylene cracker facilities proposed throughout the United States, mostly in Pennsylvania, West Virginia, the Ohio River Valley, Texas, and Louisiana. These facilities emit air toxins like benzene. They also are super emitters of carbon. According to a report by the conservation group Center for International Environmental Law, if plastic production and use grows as is currently planned, by 2030, so 10 years from now, the emissions from these ethane cracker facilities will be the equivalent of the carbon released by 295 coal plants. So as we are working so hard worldwide to get off coal and fossil fuel, these ethane cracker plants are super emitters of carbon. So the equivalent of 295 500 megawatt coal plants if these facilities are built. And let's think about what's happening. We're moving away from fossil fuel use for electricity generation. And investing in solar and wind and geothermal. We're slowly moving toward cleaner transportation choices and more investments in mass transit. So the fossil fuel industry looks at plastic production as their plan B. And all of this just to give us cheap plastic and mostly cheap plastic packaging. Next slide, please. Plastic production is very much an environmental justice issue. These facilities are almost always sited in low-income communities and communities of color. So in addition to emitting greenhouse gases, they emit benzene, volatile organic compounds, nitrogen oxides, which contributes to smog formation, sulfur dioxide, and a vast amount of particulate pollution. I maintain if they were proposed in more affluent communities, they would not have been built. And the companies that are behind these new ethane cracker plants being built are little mom and pop companies like Exxon and Shell. And they view these communities as communities of least resistance. Next slide, please. Go back to the previous slide, please. So for example, look at Manchester, Texas. That's home of one of the world's largest petrochemical complexes. 90% of the people in this town live within 1 mile of a chemical facility. 97% of the people in this town are people of color. The Union of Concerned Scientists looked at the most dangerous toxic air pollutants in the Houston area. 4 of the 6 were related to making plastics. Next slide, please. So plastic is an environmental justice issue, and it's also a health issue. This scene is probably in every supermarket in the United States, except maybe not a food co-op. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say it's not good to breathe in or eat plastic, period. 42% of plastic ever produced was for plastic packaging. And a lot of it is used just for a few minutes. Think about when, in the olden days, when we would go out to lunch, right? You'd go to a deli and you'd spend too much money on a very mediocre lunch. You would bring the lunch back to your desk because you didn't have time to just stop for a half hour and eat like a normal human being. You would eat while you're returning emails. And in your typical lunch, you had a plastic bag, you had a polystyrene cup, a plate, a plastic straw, plastic utensils, way too many napkins, more condiments that you'd ever eat in 6 months, all for a terrible lunch that maybe took you 20 minutes to eat. And then that plastic stays in the environment literally for centuries. Food packaging is a particular health concern because it's not just the polymers in this plastic, it's also additives, which are very toxic. And the chemicals can migrate from the packaging into the food or into the beverage that you're drinking. Some of this plastic degrades into food if the plastic comes into contact with any food that's acidic. So for instance, never have a cup of tea in a polystyrene cup. It'll also migrate into your food if it's exposed to UV light or heat. Next slide. And the chemical PFOA is also used in food packaging because it's a grease barrier. It's used a lot in fast food packaging. So if there's one thing you take away from my talk today, never use microwavable popcorn. It used to be a go-to for me, but I have not had microwavable popcorn for years because the PFOA will likely migrate into the popcorn. And as you know from PFAS issues in communities all over the country, exposure to PFAS results in a number of serious adverse health impacts, including kidney cancer, testicular cancer, thyroid disease, colitis, things like that. Plastics are showing up in our bodies when tested. There are peer-reviewed studies showing that there are microplastics in the air, in the rain, in our food. There's a very, very small health study that looked at human feces around the world. All of the samples of the poop had microplastics in them. So health researchers need to focus on what are microplastics doing to the lining of our guts, and are they being absorbed by the bloodstream? One health researcher in Holland says microplastics, quote, may pass the membranes and enter blood circulation and may even pass the blood-brain barrier or the placenta. This is an area that needs a tremendous amount of more research, is the potential impact of consuming or breathing in microplastics. There are some very good studies documenting the presence of microplastics in water. Next slide, please. There's a terrific researcher, Dr. Sherry Mason, who's now at Penn State. She sampled 159 tap water samples in 14 countries. 81% had microplastics in it. Another study by Dr. Sherry Mason looked at bottled water. Twice as much microplastic in bottled water than from tap water, which makes sense because most bottled water is in plastic bottles. And then when you turn the plastic bottle cap, it's quite possible that microscopic pieces of plastic get into your drinking water. Next slide. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but there's plastic in seafood, especially shrimp, mussels, oysters, anything you eat whole. And this is the point in my class at Bennington College where there's always a couple students jumping out of their seats, raising their hands and saying, Professor Enck, but can't we fix this problem with recycling? And it's almost like me telling them Santa Claus does not exist. Sorry if that's news for some of you, but recycling is not the solution. Next slide. I am a big, big supporter of recycling. When I was home on maternity leave and also serving on my town's Conservation Advisory Commission, I started our town's recycling program. We should keep recycling metal, glass, cardboard, but plastic recycling has been a failure at only 8.5% nationwide. Next slide. This is typically what's in our waste stream. So we can do a huge amount with composting and recycling. Look at that, food waste, yard trimmings, and wood. That, all those sections can be composted, particularly if you keep it effectively source separated. Next slide. But to deal with the plastic issue, we have to do the obvious. We have to stop making so much plastic. Think about you are waltzing into your bathroom at home and you notice the bathtub is overflowing with water. Are you going to take a cup and start bailing out the overflowing water from your tub, or are you going to turn off the tap? We need to turn off the tap on plastic production. Next slide, please. And it's very much linked to climate change and protecting oceans. You remember the proposals to do offshore oil and gas drilling. Next slide, please. And there's lots of good information on our website. I do want to focus just for a moment on recycling. If your community recycles plastic, I will wager a bet that the only plastics that actually get recycled is the ones that are labeled number 1 or number 2 plastic. The rest are sent to incinerators or landfills because there simply is not reliable markets for these plastics. And big companies like Coke and McDonald's and Starbucks are using virgin plastics for their packaging because it's cheaper. And remember, the the federal government provides subsidies for fossil fuel. The state of Pennsylvania provides subsidies to build ethane cracker facilities. So we are subsidizing this pattern. I also want to say there's no magic machine that's going to remove the plastic from the surface of the water. Most of the plastic in the ocean falls to the bottom of the sea. So what can we do? Become informed. Look at our website, beyondplastic.org. Email us with questions. Next slide, please. New Jersey has already passed through the legislature the plastic trifecta. Congratulations. I think what made all the difference was having local laws on the books, and that pushed the state to act. I'm optimistic that the governor will sign this bill into law, but don't take anything for granted. Jen talked about the need to call and email the governor. You should definitely do that. The New Jersey plastic trifecta law is a little different than others because it bans both plastic bags and paper bags, which is very impressive. We finally have the New York plastic bag ban taking effect this Monday after litigation in the courts, which Beyond Plastics submitted an amicus on. The other thing about your bill, hopefully soon a law, is that you allow for cloth bags made from hemp. So that's unusual. We haven't seen that in other states. Next slide, please. And also, while we're waiting for the plastic trifecta to take effect in New Jersey, because it'll be a couple years, and if you don't have local laws on the books, take the principles of the trifecta and experience it in your own life. What's it like not to use plastic bags, plastic straws, and polystyrene? If you're a student, you can get these policies implemented on your campus, and you basically go up the rungs of government. And then in the end, what we really need is a federal law. So I want to mention there's a very impressive sweeping plastics reduction law introduced in Congress called the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act. It's Senate Bill 3263 and it's House Bill 5845. So that's Senate 3263, House Bill 5845. It does many important things like bans plastic bag, puts a 10-cent fee on paper, bans polystyrene, plastic straws only upon request. It directs the EPA to set up a comprehensive extended producer responsibility program for all materials. It also would bring us a national bottle bill, which I am a big, big supporter of. I think bottle bills are the best examples of extended producer responsibility. 9 states have bottle bills. I've always been completely puzzled why New Jersey does not have a bottle bill. And when people in New Jersey ask me what's next after you get the trifecta signed into law and fully implemented, I would urge you to consider working on a state level bottle bill, because it might be a while before we get a federal bottle bill. Bottle bills are just mandatory nickel or dime deposits on beverage containers, soda, beer, bottled water. You should also cover drinks. We don't have in New York, for instance, Snapple or Gatorade, but you can modernize your bottle bill. And here's why bottle bills still matter, even in the world of curbside recycling. If you put a deposit on an aluminum can, like a can of soda, the recycling rate with a deposit is 78%. Without a deposit, the aluminum recycling rate is 36%. You look at glass bottles, with a deposit, 64% recycling rate, without a deposit, a 14% recycling rate. And for PET plastic soda bottles, if there's even a nickel deposit, the recycling rate is 59%. Without a deposit, it's 14%. And the bottle bill has really spurred innovation. So in the early days of the New York bottle bill, you would bring empty containers to a supermarket, and this poor minimum wage kid in a tiny room, the deposit return area in the back of the store, would manually count all the bottles, and you would get your nickels back. Now there's something called reverse vending machines, where you just pop your containers into what looks like a soda machine, but you're giving them the containers and you get a little receipt with the money you get back. That nickel deposit also results in a dramatic reduction in litter on beaches, in parks. I worked on the New York bottle bill when I was a college student, and one of our close allies to get it passed was the Farm Bureau, because they were concerned about all the litter in farm fields and how it affected animals. Next slide, please. So that is really my point with today. Our Earth is too big to fail. There's a lot going on plastics, but we have so much more to do. The European Union banned 10 different single-use plastic items effective in 2021. The EU banned plastic cutlery, plates, straws, drink stirrers, sticks for balloons, and plastic Q-tips. Let's talk about Q-tips for a moment. It works just fine when the cotton is held together with a little cardboard or paper-based material. It does not have to be plastic. There's all sorts of opportunities for innovation. I don't know what we're going to do about cigarette butts. One of the top things you find in litter cleanups, those filters contain plastic. There's so much we can do. Beyond Plastics is trying to get airports to stop selling single-use plastic water and instead install filling stations and water fountains for your own water. The San Francisco airport did this. Many schools are doing it. The first time I saw one of those cool water filler stations that it has a little tally telling you how many plastic water bottles were prevented was in the Obama White House. So, you know, the key to this issue is to think of different opportunities where we can reduce our plastic footprint. We have to do all that, and then it will lead to state bills becoming law and national bills. Next slide. And I want to leave you with the really, really important point that we can't solve climate change without reducing the generation and the use of plastic. Climate change is a crisis. We know the planet is warming. The last 5 years are the hottest on record, and the United Nations says we have about 11 years left to avoid catastrophic climate change. And some scientists think it's sooner. Next slide, please. After Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico, this is a picture of Puerto Rico. It hit Puerto Rico and the US Virgin Islands. So I still pay a lot of attention to issues in the Caribbean because that used to be my EPA region. So it was 2 hurricanes that hit within a week. And in Puerto Rico, the hurricane hit the entire island, not just part of the island. So if you were in a coastal community, you were really at risk with hurricanes and sea level rise. Many of us worked hard on Hurricane Sandy. I remember the Sandy response like it was yesterday. I went over to Edison, New Jersey every day, working 7 days a week, 14 hours a day to deal with the environmental impacts of Sandy and Irene. We know that climate change doesn't cause hurricanes, but it makes hurricanes stronger than they would have been because the ocean temperature or the sea temperature is warmer. And that warmer ocean temperature serves like rocket fuel. So a category 2 hurricane becomes a category 4 hurricane in all the damage it does. So climate change is here. Next slide, please. We need to do everything we can to avoid California's climate apocalypse. This was an actual headline just about a month ago in the LA Times. The fires in California are just unbelievable. And people say it's the new normal, but it is just unlivable. So much of the health damage is not just from people who perish in fires, but the air pollution from the smoke that lingers for hundreds of miles. Next slide, please. Remember when the Australia fires were front page news? They've now been replaced with the California fires. So there's a lot we need to do to reduce the demand for fossil fuel, and that means reducing the demand for plastic. Next slide. Renewable energy is cheaper than it's ever been and creates far more jobs. For people who are concerned about the aesthetics of wind turbines, we have to deal with the aesthetics of wind turbines. I urge people to talk to wind developers early. Avoid putting wind turbines in migratory bird patterns, but you will see wind turbines. And I'd rather look at a wind turbine than deal with the devastating impacts of climate change, acid rain, increased asthma from fossil fuel generation. So this is also a gut check moment for the environmental community, and I want to appeal to all of you as environmental leaders. I am really worried about some of the knee-jerk opposition to solar, large-scale solar facilities and large-scale wind farms. We're very good at talking about what we don't want. We need to proactively put hours and hours into getting what we do want. And that means putting our personal reputations on the line, supporting renewable energy projects so we can get off the fossil fuel cycle. Next slide, please. So the question is, are you in? You obviously are, because you're active with ANJAC and you are on this, this Zoom. There's a lot of good information out there. The statistics that I cited, 3 pounds of fish in the ocean for every pound of plastic, that's only going to change if we get involved. And certainly there are things that businesses can do on their own, and we applaud that. but this issue is so serious. We don't have a lot of time to act. And so, you know, my view as a former federal regulator is we need laws on the books, and then we need to make sure those laws are enforced. It's like if you go to a surgeon, she's going to tell you you probably need surgery for a problem. As a former regulator, I'm going to say you need laws and strong enforcement of those laws. We don't have a lot of time, and we only get local, state, and national laws on the books when we have well-informed grassroots supporters. So every one of you can play a role. Next slide. So this is Beyond Plastics on social media. I hope you tweeted some of this talk. We're small, but we reach a lot of people through social media. You can also follow me. I'm at ENCKJ on Twitter. I don't do Facebook or Instagram, but I am a little bit of a Twitter addict, and I post a lot on plastic. So please follow Beyond Plastics, follow me. Next slide. And that's where we are. Bennington College is our gracious host. You know, they provide us lots of academic support, but we have to do all of our own fundraising. You can go to our website and click on the bottom right, and you can sign up to get our emails. So this is free. This is just informational updates. We have things, for instance, we have a model letter that you can give to your supermarket, urging the supermarket to reduce their plastic footprint. We've got some information up there on black plastic, which is typically not recycled. We have information on plastic in tea bags. So believe it or not, there are microplastics in some tea bags. So every day, we read whatever comes out on plastics issues. We love reading peer-reviewed scientific papers. I'm very involved in the microplastic issue. And so we kind of sort through what's useful and what's not, what's credible and what's not, and we throw it up on our webpage. So I think I am out of time and really happy to take any questions or comments. I particularly welcome disagreements. Thank you.
Thank you, Judith. That was fantastic.
Thanks.
Yes, we do. I have a bunch of questions to read.
Well, before we get to that, Liz, if I could just jump in real quick, I want to correct an omission on my part earlier in the program, and I want to extend a hearty thanks and gratitude to an additional sponsor, Garden State Labs. And so they are a wonderful partner and an essential service in New Jersey. Garden State Labs helps us to get good quality data, particularly on water, but on a number of substances in our water. And so we're grateful to them for their work and to their sponsorship at Environmental Congress. So apologies, and we'll make sure we get your logo in the beginning for our additional sessions. But thank you, Garden State Labs, and thank you for being here today to learn more about plastics. We appreciate you being here. Sorry for that interlude. I just want to thank Judith personally for everything that she has done, for inspiring me, and put a big old exclamation point to everything she said. Absolutely, positively. I have sat in New Jersey's Environmental Senate and testified next to, before, and after very big multi-billion-dollar industry that has said they need single-use plastics to continue to make fracking economically viable for them. And I said, well, this seems to be an opportunity to solve more than one problem at a time here. Get rid of fracking and plastic pollution all at once. And that was exactly not what they wanted to hear. But luckily, our New Jersey Environmental Senate was receptive to my message. And I think they went, oh boy, we got a problem in Jersey.
Yeah, Jen is really good at testifying on public hearings. I've seen her in action, and you would be proud.
I grew up in a big Irish Catholic family, so, you know, conversation and dispute and argument was part of our what we did. So it's one of the things I also enjoy. But I do need to encourage you to make sure you reach out to, tweet at Governor Murphy, because he is getting multi-billion-dollar pressure not to sign that bill that sits in front of him. And I know we all want that bill to turn into law. So with that, I'll stop because we really want to ask Judith questions, and Liz is going to take the helm with that. Thanks, Liz.
Thank you very much. Thanks again, Judith. It was terrific to hear from you and to see your presentation. Really a lot of information every time you're with us. So thank you. Terza has asked about the current bill in New Jersey on governor's desk, that do you think that the bill goes too far about with the banning paper bags? And is that as powerful, is the argument against paper as powerful as it is against single-use plastic?
I don't think the bill goes too far at all, because there are implications to paper production, even if they're made from secondary materials. And I'm reminded of a conversation I had with a supermarket executive where there was a city in Vermont that banned plastic bags and did nothing on paper, silent on paper. And she told me that 80% of the customers just shifted from plastic to paper as opposed to reusables. And what we really want to see is reusable bags. And there's no data that it carries the COVID virus. That was something that the plastic industry was espousing. That's not true. So, you know, I was a little worried whether New Jersey was going to ban both. It's the only in the country. And my understanding is one reason why it happened, and we'll take it, you know, strange bedfellows, is when you ban plastic bags, the stores then have to provide paper bags, and paper bags are significantly more expensive than plastic bags. So what happens in state legislatures around the country is when it looks like a plastic bag ban is going to pass, suddenly there's interest in also either putting a fee on paper, or in the case of New Jersey, banning paper. And that works for me, because success is getting as many people as possible to use reusable bags.
Thank you. Walter actually asked also about the paper versus plastic impact on global warming. Is there a greater damage with plastic, or is paper comparable because of what you were just saying, right?
Well, the good thing about paper bags is they're almost entirely made from recycled material, and that helps a lot when you do the greenhouse gas analysis. So from a climate change perspective, I think plastic is worse. But if you have an opportunity to shift to reusable bags, particularly cloth bags, that's the policy shift we need that will reduce the most amount of greenhouse gases. And definitely, I mean, you all are probably bringing your own bags to the store anyway, but particularly in an age of COVID, just throw them in the wash every so often. And that takes care of any concerns. But reusable bags is the way to go. So when your effective date comes up, we're going to need all of the conservation commissions actively involved in promoting reusable bags. Get your local governments to buy a bunch, give them away, have an event, you know, donate a bag, take a bag. I don't know about you, but my husband prohibits me from bringing any more reusable bags into the house. I have so many. So I just laundered a bunch recently and gave it to a friend who volunteers at a food bank. You know, these reusable bags grow like mushrooms. So just leave them in your car, remember to use them, and it'll become second nature.
I think I gave away about 25 of them. So I was just like, I need these out of the house. And I still have too many, but you know, I have an emotional attachment to some of them because they were events that we did. So
yeah, I know. It's like jewelry for me.
Yeah.
Like the best reusable bag. Some of my students did a project last year where they collected old T-shirts and then they sewed them into reusable bags that they gave to the local food pantry. So lots of opportunities.
We've had a few environmental commissions that have done that.
Yeah.
Really
a lot of the farmers markets in New Jersey have somebody there doing it. Yeah, it's a great idea. Dennis has asked, is there a good way to deal with the hygienic issues of bulk food purchases with people bringing their own containers, et cetera?
Well, I'm afraid that we're on pause on a lot of bulk food purchase because of COVID, which is really too bad. I think we just kind of have to wait for a safe, reliable vaccine, and I think some of these restrictions will be lifted.
Right.
It's hard to deal with that.
Right. It's hard to argue. Right. Steve Foster had asked if you had a take on a team of researchers from England, China, and Saudi Arabia that have developed a process for converting plastic waste into hydrogen gas and carbon nanotubes. The group describes the process and how well it worked when tested. Do you know anything about that?
I don't know anything about that particular technology. I know the American Chemistry Council, who represent manufacturers of chemicals, they're finally admitting that plastic recycling is an abject failure with an 8.5% recycling rate, which I think is actually inflated. So they're pushing something called chemical recycling, which I'm very, very skeptical of. You basically are supposed to be able to mix all different types of plastics, 1 through 7, heat it, and then it typically would become fuel. So it's really waste to fuel. A very good recent report came out by Grassroots Alliance Against Incineration, Gaia, about how these chemical recycling facilities or plastic to fuel facilities are mostly greenwashing. Very few are actually constructed. They don't scale up. So I can't comment on this particular one, but we are seeing lots of news releases about heating plastic in the end and turning it into fuel, but actually very little accomplished in that space.
Okay.
I'm pretty skeptical about it too, Judith. I've also testified next to the national lobbyist for the Chemistry Council, and he has indicated that they have a 30-year plan to address plastic pollution. And as you know, one of the facts that really motivated me on this is the World Economic Forum that talks about by 2050. So by the time my now 11-year-old niece who lives in Australia, by the time Giselle is my age in 2050, the World Economic Forum says that we will have more plastic than fish in our ocean. So 30 years is entirely way too late to work to solve this problem. So I'm also pretty skeptical of what the Chemistry Council has to say, but I'm hopeful that they will come round and the technology will evolve and they will be a good, strong partner. But right now it seems a little iffy to me.
Yeah, the American Chemistry Council 30-year plan is about 60 years too late.
Right. I will see if Steve can give us more information on that particular project and share it with you. Thank you. Dennis has asked, is there any impetus for laws limiting excessive plastic use in packaging for any consumer products like detergent wrapped in plastic, placed in a case, which is then placed in a carton? Is there any progress on those kind of?
Not yet, but there needs to be. I've been thinking about this a lot with so much online commerce. I spoke to Amazon recently. I got nowhere. You order one thing from Amazon, it comes in a cardboard box that you can recycle. The next thing comes in a plastic envelope that you really can't easily recycle. I mean, my definition of recyclable is, can you put it in your recycling bin at home and have a fighting chance of getting it recycled? This would come under the category of extended producer responsibility, or EPR, which is a law and has been working for quite a long time in various Canadian provinces, Europe. It is a provision in the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act. The short definition of extended producer responsibility is if you, i.e. Amazon, produce the packaging, you have to figure out how to take it back and reuse or recycle it. Because right now, and the reason why we're not making more progress is there's an economic disconnect. The companies that are producing all of this, they're just thinking, how can they sell their stuff? For instance, there are lots of things in the supermarket that it's one kind of plastic and then there's a plastic sleeve over it. And there's a little note that says you have to pull it off before you put the bottle in the recycling bin. No one does that. So we need these packaging designers to design for end of life, not just our responsibility ends. So basically, this is a giant environmental externality. Companies are producing this, and then they're depending upon taxpayers to pay the cost to get rid of it. And that's just not sustainable. And that's why I'm excited about the Breakthrough from Plastic Pollution Act, because it's good to address this nationwide if you can.
Right.
And I can send you all a list of who are co-sponsors. And it's really shocking that virtually no members of the New Jersey congressional delegation have signed on as co-sponsors to this bill. There are about 85 co-sponsors in the House and 11 in the Senate. So we need local conservation commissions to pass resolutions in support of the bill. And we need you to talk to your federal representatives to support this legislation.
Thank you. Kathleen Cacavalli has asked, do we have any recommendations for alternative containers, particularly for takeout? And another part of that question is what can be done with these quote unquote compostable containers? Because some people might not realize that actually, takes some work.
Yeah, so John Schwartz, a really good climate change writer in the New York Times, just wrote an article October 1st, Why Biodegradable Isn't What You Think. So when something says it's composting, that often means that it has to go to a high temperature commercial composting operation. Don't put those products in your backyard composting bin. So when it comes to food takeout, we don't have a lot of options. We do kind of have a hierarchy of what's worse. And hopefully we can get to the point of reusable containers. When I lived in Brooklyn, and this was pre-COVID, I would go to local restaurants and bring my glass Pyrex, and they would just put the food in there for me. Of course, defeating the whole purpose of takeout, but that was okay. And there are just a handful of small businesses popping up around the country that have reusable packaging for takeout. You kind of pay a deposit, and when they deliver, you give them the old containers back. That's the kind of innovation we need. That's what the New Jersey Department of Economic Development should be doing, is New Jersey has an enormous solid waste crisis, right? You've got incinerators that are polluting low-income communities in Camden and Newark, the Ironbound neighborhood. You don't have a lot of landfills left, if any. So your economic development money at the state level needs to go toward attracting innovation companies to deal with the solid waste crisis. Let's shift to refillable beverage containers, which major companies do all over the world. Let's get money to schools so they can install dishwashing equipment in cafeterias rather than serving on polystyrene foam. Let's look at Meals on Wheels. That is a perfect model. Meals on Wheels delivers 1 million meals a year nationwide. So when you drop off the hot meal to the senior, you take back their reusable packaging, and then you wash it and you use it again. In short order, it pays for itself. We really need people thinking about innovation, and particularly at the local level. So we have some good models we can point to.
Thank you. That's great. Steve Frattini had asked about, do you know if plastic eating bacteria can help? Is that actually a thing?
It's a thing. I'm not going to put a lot of faith into it. I mean, it's been a thing for about 30 years. There's too much plastic waste out there. Rather than investing in bacteria eating material, no offense, Steve, it's a lot easier to reduce the use of plastic at the source. This, like so many issues facing our society, we need systemic approaches, not Band-Aids.
Well, Martin's got a real big question. How do you respond to critics who dispute facts and science on what's happening to the environment in favor of business? How do we get more altruism for the planet? Well, I wish we all knew that, right?
Yeah, I tell everyone the only thing we really have on our side are the facts. And that's what you've got to stick with. and involving large groups of people. It's so much more fun working as a team or as a group. And you'll be amazed. I used to work in the New York governor's office. So few people contact their elected officials and their governors on issues. When I was in the governor's office, it was a constant parade of special interest lobbyists coming by, arguing why a bill should not become law. But a small group of people can really make a difference. And all we have is the facts. You know the Margaret Mead quote, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed people can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has.
Very good.
Absolutely. Just weighing in on that, Judith, I want to say that, and I'm not cutting this off, but I won't name any names, but a number of assemblymen and women have said with regard to the plastics bill and preceding bills where we had success, oh, you're not going to go away until we give you what you want. So what is it that you want? And on plastics, we heard from a number of representatives, okay, you've worn us down. Your people keep calling.
Great.
And so I mean, Anjak's constituents, I think they're on it. You know, when we say, will you please call, will you please email, will you please tweet at, and just, you know, to give a shout out to the Girl Scouts of Teaneck, I mean, they were all over their elected officials and they helped secure a meeting with the budget chair, and we were having challenges moving this bill through Senate budget, and they secured that meeting and invited me to come in. And ever since then, you know, we didn't have any problems with budget because the Girl Scouts were on it. So under penalty of Girl Scouts, legislators that pay attention. So it really does mean a lot when you call, that email, when we could meet in person doing that. So.
Thank you. Jen, you might know this better than Judith, I'm not sure, but Ed was asking about the New Jersey bottle law efforts. Where does it stand and who's in the lead, if anything?
Oh, the bottle bill in New Jersey, yeah, much to my consternation as well, is nowhere at this moment. I did see that question and I just did a quick search of bills this year. I don't even think it's introduced in this legislative session. When it was around a few years ago, I know Assemblywoman Valerie Veneri-Huddle up in Bergen County was really a lead on the issue, and she's been great, and I know there are others as well. But the bill seemed to, whatever path it was on, do a really good job of getting extraordinarily quagmired in some tough politics. And so the bottle bill deposit got linked to fixing lead service lines in communities where they were experiencing high lead levels in drinking water. And so that created all kinds of conversations about environmental justice and equity and distribution of funds and oversight of funds, and it got heavy fast. And so funds for lead lines in many communities, I won't say that problem is solved, but it's well on its way in New Jersey. And I do think it's time to look at a bottle deposit bill again. It has some significant opposition. So we'd need to plan out where we're going to go with that and how we would plot a path to success. As a note, one of the other bills that's really interesting that we're working on very closely with sponsor Senator, or the prime sponsor, Senator Smith, who's the chairman of the Senate Environment Committee, is a recycled content bill. So that recycled content bill would require that a certain amount of plastic be used in any packaging for products sold in New Jersey. So the idea is to try to create some kind of a marketplace for all of that plastic that is being recycled. It is not perfect, but it is a move in the direction to try to do something with the recycled materials that we simply have nothing or very little to do with now. But the bottle bill is nowhere at the moment, but I agree it needs to be resurrected, and maybe that means we need to make a phone call to Assemblywoman Veneri-Huddle and see what she's thinking these days.
I would strongly recommend that you talk to the sponsor, see what other sponsors you might add. I think a New Jersey bottle bill would be the perfect follow-up to your plastic trifecta law. And you think about the Jersey Shore, I mean, just the reduction in litter. There's a really good organization called Container Recycling Institute, CRI.org. They have all the data you need. And I think if ANJAC like puts your credibility and your muscle behind it, you all could make it happen. And it's a great way to involve people.
So next week I had goal setting for 2021 on my list. So it seems like I've gotten a jump on that task. So, you know, I like doing two things at once.
Great.
Well, thank
No
you, Jen.
pressure.
Rosella had actually asked a question about how do we get the stores more on board with dealing with the things like what Judith showed, the picture of all the produce and the plastic. So Jen addressed that question. So thank you. Katie Parrish has asked about how can we make the transition away from plastic more affordable for small businesses and low income communities?
Yeah, so the way I want you to think about alternatives to plastic is we don't necessarily need these new age materials like algae and hemp and other things. We have paper, cardboard, metal, and glass. Those are alternatives to plastic. Sometimes they're more expensive than plastic, but again, if you can shift to reusables, it pays for itself over time. But we do want to be mindful of the cost issues, particularly for low-income consumers. I get nervous that we don't want the alternatives to plastics products to kind of be like organic food was 30 years ago, where only a small sliver of society could afford organic food. We want non-plastic alternatives to be available to everyone. And a lot of it is supply and demand. The more stores that say we don't want plastic packaging, you're going to see more alternatives and the cost will come down. But cardboard is really not that expensive. If you are a restaurant, you have lots of alternatives to polystyrene. I will be honest, polystyrene is cheap, but the cost delta is not that significant, especially as we increase demand.
Thank you.
Yeah, having here the polystyrene industry talk, you know, there's no alternatives. You never have takeout again. It'll be a disaster if we get rid of it. But I remember when my Chinese food didn't come in polystyrene.
Yeah, it came in cardboard with that little metal handle you didn't really need.
There was a time before.
That's right. That's right. Lyle has asked, which states have the best bottle bills so we can use that for a model? I know California and Maine have really good ones.
Maine does. I don't like the California bottle bill. I think the model is Oregon.
Right.
I would look at Oregon first. New York's okay. You know, there's always a fight over unclaimed deposits because some people just won't return the containers. So what do you do with that money? What I like about Oregon is it has an economic push toward refillables. And in the National Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act, introduced by Senator Udall and Representative Lowenthal, they model their national bottle bill on Oregon.
Nice. Good. I think I have covered most. Oh, Rosella had said that she says that she had seen videos about a UK company using crushed bottles to create asphalt in the highways. Do you know, is there any hope of that process really being?
Yeah, that's very common. It's called glassfault. If you walk around Manhattan in the evening and you see the sidewalks glistening a little bit, that's because there's like a 5% mix of glass cullet in the sidewalk production. So glassfault is definitely an option. I mean, ideally you want glass bottles to be recycled into new glass bottles. But absent that, it's recycled into fiberglass insulation, like Owens Corning would take a lot of glass. It's used for landfill cover. It's used for glassfault. And again, we have to get the economic development agencies at the local level and the state level looking at the quote waste issue as a resource issue. and get, you know, your economic development agency is trying to get the next Amazon warehouse sited in New Jersey, or the next big office park or something. They need to have a person who is a recycling expert, a waste reduction expert, and a composting expert. And they need to be aggressively courting those companies to come to New Jersey.
Yeah, I think we've also seen, and the question referred to as well, the crushed plastic bottles. And so I have seen some studies using crushed plastic to create roadway surfaces or walking surfaces. I have concerns with that. I sit on the State Water Supply Advisory Council. I know how difficult it is to get new regulations passed to treat our drinking water. We have not had substantial updates to New Jersey's drinking water standards prior to this PFAS, PFOA updates, and New Jersey is the only state that has done that. We haven't had anything since the 80s, substantial. So, you know, getting the materials that will leach from crushed plastic, from wear and tear, so just
the abrasion of the tires,
sunshine and, you know, rain, that's going to be a disaster for drinking water getting into our systems and then, you know, it coming out of your faucet. So that's something I'm not a big fan of.
I fully agree with you. I mean, not every recycling reuse option makes sense. And certainly using plastic for road construction, all the abrasion from the tires, you're just going to have so much airborne microplastics, and also, as you say, Jen, leaching into groundwater.
Yeah,
I'm with you on that one.
I think we've answered all the questions, and I want to thank everybody. And we have many other comments just saying thank you for your talk, and that they're going to use what they've learned from you today. And you know, we'll share your contact information for those that have any other questions. So thank you.
Yeah, it was great
this has
to be
been
with
fantastic.
you.
Really great to see you.
Very
Be
much.
well, be safe.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us today, Judith. Really appreciate it. Oh wait, do that again, Julie. We've got our tambourines going. Thank you, Judith. Thank you, ANJAC staff. Thank you, all of our EC members. Great, safe weekend, and we look forward to seeing you at next week's Environmental Congress. So please come join us again Thursday at 6 p.m. Wonderful.
Bye, everybody.
Everybody, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.